I'm Shlomi Ron. I'm the co-founder of the Visual Storytelling Institute based here in sunny Miami, Florida. And one of the top questions we get a lot from our clients is what makes a good brand narrative or business story effective? And our answer always seems to be the same, because definitely you need to have a great product, but at the end of the day, it really depends on how deep you know your customer. And for this exact point, I'd like to introduce you today to a great guest on our show today, Tory Gentes. Tory is based in Colorado, and she is an immersive ethnographer and partner at the Palmerston Group, where she answers pretty much the same question, the why behind human behavior for major brands like Nike, Coca-Cola, Cirque du Soleil, and others, including a wide range of NGOs around the globe. In 2015, Tory was the recipient of the Young Professional Grant from the Qualitative Research Consultants Association, and she was also recognized as the first American winner to receive the 2017 Qualitative Excellence Award from the same organization. And this is one of the top honor in her industry. Wow, this is a fantastic accomplishment story. And we're super excited to have you today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Honored to be here. This is my first video podcast, so should be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, it's a way for us to bring some of the top visual storytelling experts from a variety of the aspects of the discipline, and help our audience learn more how they can perfect their craft. And that's why we thought ethnography is really one of the most not talked about areas in marketing, and especially when you're trying to understand who is your customer, and really get to the bottom of what made them tick in order to come up with an effective marketing strategy. In our case, is the whole visual storytelling strategy.
Yeah.
So with that, I wanted to kind of flip back the pages to where you really got started with your journey. And maybe you can tell us, what was your backstory and how you kind of started with ethnography.
That's the fun stuff. I'd love it. I'm going to try to give you the cliff notes, because I could go down so many rabbit holes, but you'll have to bear with me, and I'll give you kind of the overarching structure. But the cool thing about qualitative market research, and ethnography kind of fits under that umbrella, is that I have yet to meet one qualitative researcher that had a linear path to that discipline. So it's not like being a lawyer or accountant. They all come from different backgrounds. They found their way through different methods, and mine was kind of the same thing. So my backstory is really, I was doing ethnography before I even knew it had a term, or that it was called that. And it was just because I think those skills came really natural to me. So for years, I kind of beat myself up around the fact that, like, what do I have that's this tangible on paper skill to offer? And I really totally discounted the softer skills of being able to connect with strangers, to gain trust in 20 seconds of meeting them, and hear their stories and have them really open up and tell you their, most intimate thoughts. And that always came natural to me. I was always the one, now we're going back 10 years ago, but in college at the parties, I'd be in the back room with the girl crying on my shoulder because she's sharing her whole life story, and everyone's in the front room drinking. I just happened to be that person that people really gravitate to. So I went to Syracuse University, graduated 2010 from the entrepreneurship program, which was great because it was very much more of a hands-on program, less about in the classroom and more about working with real entrepreneurs and consulting for their businesses. And after graduating, I was there at a really ripe time where the university was really supporting student entrepreneurs in their businesses. So they actually incentivized me and paid me to stay after I graduated to work on my own business. And at the time, it was a t-shirt company called Squeeze My Tees.
Nice.
And so I got to spend a year basically connected to free resources of mentors and office space and accountants, lawyers, and that kind of thing. So long story short, I ended up then staying another year because I had recognized an opportunity on campus that was kind of being missed in terms of a chancellor's mission. So she was at the time really focused on getting entrepreneurship out of the business school and into all of the different disciplines on campus, the arts, sciences, engineering, but campuses can be very politically driven and very protective. So I had proposed a position that said, hey, hire a recent graduate who still looks like a student. That way, you know, you totally play up what the perception is from the outside.
Like embedded journalist, right?
Exactly. So I thought of it as like being a mole on campus. And so I got that position funded and approved. And then I actually applied for it and was awarded it. And the job was student entrepreneurial consultant, which meant I helped the students with their businesses. But then the other side of it was going all across campus and talking to the various deans and trying to figure out what their needs were, what their fears were, what their challenges were, what they were trying to protect, and with a very non-threatening kind of face, because I still look like a student, be able to get even underground the layer that the chancellor couldn't get. So the top down wasn't working. It had to go from the bottom up. So it was really aligning these incentives of what do the students need, what do the deans need, and how do we accomplish the goal of getting entrepreneurship across disciplines. And so again, that was, I guess, a perfect example of what we do in qualitative research is understanding the population and figuring out how to align the business goals. So I had no idea that's what I was doing at the time, but that was kind of my first leg into it. And then after that, the little voice in my head, I always wanted to go overseas. So one-way ticket to Africa, planned to be maybe 3 or 4 months, but a year and a half, 2 years later, I came home and I had spent time going throughout Africa and Southeast Asia and helping entrepreneurs start their businesses too. So I helped start a food delivery program in South Africa under the umbrella of a bigger grocery store chain. And in Thailand, I helped create a Wi-Fi westernized sit-down coffee shop that acted as a revenue generator for all the other nonprofit initiatives they were doing. And in both cases, the same principles applied. I was in the communities, I was participating in the communities, I was understanding everything from the business to the emotional level in order to accomplish the goal, which it came natural, I suppose, but I still didn't really know where that fit and how that skill could be applied. So then fast forwarding to now, in the background, my now business partner initially was always a fantastic mentor, and he's the one that I have to credit for even showing me that there's a world of qualitative market research. So I was lucky to work on some of his projects, and now years later, I'm partner with that company and doing full-blown market research, qualitative market research projects.
Oh, that's awesome. This is fantastic. So it sounds like, it's mostly like a lot of people say, they stumble by mistake to their profession, and looks like that was the case with you, that you started in school and kind of like it and saw the benefits, the value they could bring by basically leveraging your natural native skills of making people open up to you, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And share stuff, which is a really rare skill set to have.
Yeah. And I think like what's interesting too is I never even, still today, I have to admit, I don't see it as following a career as much as I do following a lifestyle. And that was the one thing I always did know that I loved, which, was traveling, people, embedding myself in culture, asking questions, being curious always. And so I guess that the industry it just fit the lifestyle. Yeah, and happened to align. So here I am.
Yeah, the win-win are always the best, right?
Yep.
Great. So, we have, as I mentioned, marketers in the audience that most likely are interested in finding, okay, this is fantastic discipline, but how can I take advantage of it? So can you kind of zero in on the definition more about what ethnography research means, what are the top categories and what are the core benefits for marketers and businesses?
Absolutely. So it's helpful to put the context, again, thinking about qualitative market research as the umbrella, and then ethnography being really one methodology to design a research study of many, because you could do, focus groups, which is the classic one-way mirror with your clients in the back and 8 people in the front, and you're moderating. or you could do phone IDIs or interviews just like we are webcam.
Yep.
So the way that I define ethnography is really taking it past the traditional way of conducting market research, which a lot of times exists in a facility, which is a very, kind of conferencey, sterile environment. And given my background, I just always preferred to do things much more on the ground level because I think it brings a level of authenticity. So you become the person that you're studying. And there shouldn't be any rules. There shouldn't be any boundaries. I think the world is your focus group. So ethnography for me, and it's, my own definition, is really collecting scrappy ground level insights straight from the moment that things are happening in real time, meeting people where they are given whatever topic you're studying, and meeting them there and intercepting them in those locations to get the raw experience and feedback and real-time story that they have to share.
And do you find yourself mostly, it sounds like you're focusing mostly on the offline space, but do you find any interaction with the online, maybe kind of hearing something offline and then kind of validating this in social media to see if there's a match?
Totally. I love that you brought that up, because to answer another question that you asked earlier, the budgets for these types of projects are all over the place. Obviously, it's very different if a company like Coca-Cola is hiring you than a small startup. And I don't ever want the budget to be a barrier, to entry to do qualitative research, because really anybody can do it. Yep. So that said, I've dabbled in doing this thing called social listening, which is not any face-to-face interviews, but rather taking the topic and then, manually just spending the time in the saddle looking at all the social commentary. So for example, and you can get really scrappy with these ideas too. So let's say it's about financial investing, and maybe there's a company that wants to offer a new retirement product. Yep. And normally, people are pretty tight-lipped about something personal like financing and their attitudes and behaviors around it. So I took that project on, and the goal was to just do the social listening piece, looking at the organic, natural conversations. And one thing I found really fruitful, which you wouldn't normally think this way, but book reviews. So if you read all the commentary under book reviews, find any book based on the topic that you're studying, and people are giving reviews not just about, book was great, book was bad, but they're also incorporating why they think that. And often the why they think that has to do with their attitudes or orientation around the topic itself, or the beliefs that they have around it. So yes, there's this nice, beautiful combination, and I've done it where you could do the social listening piece online just to help guide the types of questions and maximize your time face-to-face once you do those interviews. Or it could come later and really beef up the artifacts that you have to show. And it's really cool, because in that example, I was able to do both. I did the online listening, and then we did interviews, and the themes were so consistent, which is great. That's what you want to find. So
no, I find this whole space really fascinating, because when we work with our clients, we use our 9-step framework, and your area fits beautifully in our story making phase, which is really where we learn more about who is the customer. We call it the hero of your story, and really what makes them tick, and what conflict they're trying to solve. And typically, and I'm sure you agree, basically there is 4 areas that customers are really operated in. One is what they feel, think, do, and say, right? Totally. And the do and say is what we typically consider the visible part. The most challenging part is really getting into what they think and feel, which is more deeply buried, and you can get it only indirectly by searching online to see if they share it, like you said, with the reviews, when they share the why. But I'm kind of wondering how you get into the deepest levels of the think and feel.
Totally. Yeah. And there's so many ways to answer that. So one thing that just came to mind, which is the beauty of qualitative research, especially when you're doing that one-on-one interview, is a lot of times, because people don't know, right? They don't know why they do the things. And I ask questions that they're like, geez, I never thought about that. And you get people that are just better at answering, and those that they're not thinking that way. So the beauty of doing that in person is sometimes I'll get someone that kind of feels like they're just saying what makes sense to say, or what they think, the answer is. Right. And the beauty around creating that trust and that rapport, and almost you get them to forget that it's research and they're talking to a friend, is you can kind of call them out and say, but wait, do you actually do that? But do you really do that? And the number of times like, nope, I don't. I guess I don't. And and so, and you can kind of laugh about it. And then it's like, okay, well, let's break that down further. And another thing that I do too is in the beginning of the interview, before it's even started, is I kind of set the ground rules, and I tell them there's no right or wrong answers. So that part is no pressure on you. This is literally from your experience. And I just lost my train of thought.
Yeah, we're talking about how do you kind of
devil's advocate. Okay.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, I'll set the ground rules, and I'll say, like, I'm going to ask you questions that are going to sound like I'm trying to convince you of something or push you in one direction or the other, but that's not the intent. My job is to be devil's advocate, because the purpose is to get even deeper under those layers. And I find that works really well, because without that context, the questions could sound kind of conflicting, right? Like even just saying, but do you really do that? I mean, is that really? And so when you set that context, it really kind of like sets people at ease, that they know, okay, you're asking this question not because you're trying to sell me, or you're trying, to convince me to go to this gym versus that gym. It's really just a really effective way to pitch two things against each other and get deeper insights.
Yeah. And also I think, when you kind of start maybe kind of sharing your vulnerability in the context, then it's kind of humanize your ask, and people tend to kind of, as you said, treat you as a friend and share more authentically, their thoughts and beliefs. And so it's kind of an exchange.
The minute that you get the sense that the people you're talking to have forgotten that you are asking them questions for a reason other than you're just a friend in their group, is when you've really been successful, which is why I love that street level research, because like I've intercept people in the bathroom line, or I might like a way in to a stranger on the street. You see them taking a photo. Oh, can I take that photo for you? Oh, sure. You take their photo, and then you've already kind of gotten past that first, awkward, I guess, layer of trust. And then it opens up that natural organic conversation. So
so you got to start with making initial deposit somehow.
Exactly. And it takes thick skin too. I think that's one of the biggest learnings about this is it can be really easy and safe to do research in the facility because someone else has recruited your 15 people. All you have to do is show up and ask your questions from your discussion guide, and not to discount it because that takes work too. But I think the reason that people don't just open the front door and go have a conversation is our own anxiety, talking to strangers and getting past that first approach, and knowing that you'll get rejected and that's okay.
Yeah, I think what you're trying to do in essence is really to kind of break the classic mold of the sensor survey that comes with the pad and knock on the door, and people kind of frame you as a researcher running a survey, and they most likely going to reject it. But if you kind of flow in naturally to what they're already doing and not appearing, as interrupting anything, but if anything, you are complementing what they're trying to do.
Exactly.
That's something that's but I'm kind of curious, are you getting any rejection sometimes?
Minimal. I have to say, for all the times that I've done this, there's only a couple times that I was flat out rejected. And something interesting about getting rejected. So I did a project. I drove coast to coast, New Hampshire to California, and I stopped random strangers and asked them to tell me a secret. And so, I mean, that's really kind of abrasive. You're walking up to someone and now I want to know a secret within 20 seconds.
Right.
And it was incredible because I really only got rejected one time, and it was actually because of me. I could even feel in my body that I don't know, I was just thrown off. There was just, I wasn't totally comfortable. And I made that approach, and I approached two businessmen probably on their lunch break in Cincinnati, walking in suits. And here I am kind of looking like a hobo. And I could already tell they were like turning their bodies the other way as I approached them. So it's actually just as much about you and your energy that you're bringing to it. And then of course there's all those tricks and tips to comfortably intersect somebody. And another thing that really helps too, and the incentives can be really small. So for example, I did a project in Las Vegas for a huge entertainment company. And it was all about understanding the millennial experience in Vegas for the 72-hour window on average that people spend time there. And so I had a bunch of like $15 New York roller coaster passes. And so I was doing these street intercepts and intercepted a gentleman in the bathroom line. So then there was already that reason to start the conversation, and then made it that much easier. Hey, would you be willing to, talk to me for a little bit? I have some of these roller coaster passes. And if you're really willing, maybe I can interview you on the roller coaster, which does a couple things. One, I mean, it's offering this incentive, and now you've broken that barrier of, this is not research, we're friends and we're doing something fun. And then in terms of the storytelling piece, what an incredible video. I took a video of the interview on the roller coaster to include into the report to the client. And in this case, it was like that one little moment of riding a roller coaster and asking him the perfect questions with the backdrop of the setting. It just throws my audience, my clients, into that experience, like, to the ninth degree, where it's not just what he's saying. I mean, we're physically in the moment doing it.
Yeah, but I get a sense, obviously, that you got to play a gradual road here in terms of how you kind of ease into the dialogue. As you said, you cannot really just break in with your actual question right off the bat, because it will tend to kind of scare people off. Yeah, that's awesome. So now that we got a sense of a little bit about what ethnography means and how you use it in practice, can you tell us, from a business perspective, obviously you work with a wide range of clients by now. What are the typical business objectives they seek?
Sure. Yeah. And that's, again, like all my answers, is very, very wide spectrum. So you can literally go from the highest level of business questions to very specific. So the highest level being even something as simple as, well, going back to the millennials, we want to understand this population, millennials, in the context of Vegas. And there was like really no rules on it. It wasn't about trying to figure out why aren't millennials purchasing tickets to this entertainment company and their shows. It was more of, well, how are they making decisions about spending their time and their money in Vegas, which is very different than they do back at home. So that was very much, the high level look of, the client just wants to understand the population. And that population could be their existing target customers, or it could be customers that they're hoping to acquire, or, a new service or product that will attract new customers, and they want to start gauging if there's a fit there. And then that can literally be funneled down to something as specific as the advertising agency has developed this concept that might be a commercial, and maybe it's just like sketches and imagery, to testing reactions with the relevant population about that. Well, what do you think about this? Like, what does it conjure up? What are your emotions? What are your feelings? So it's, hedging the bet before that investment of actually producing whatever that ad might be. And another use that's really cool, and I love this side of it too, is employee engagement. So companies that want to really understand the culture and the mood of what's happening in their own company, and they, the top down doesn't work. So a third party coming in and saying, listen, this is another strategy I use. Nothing you say is going to offend me. And frankly, I don't care. I care about what you're saying, but I really don't care, if you like it, dislike it or not. And so, and employee engagement is another example of how this work is
probably
used.
It's big. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So in cases where the client is interested in maybe perfecting their overall brand narrative, so typically I tend to define a brand narrative as if you think of a necklace, like the entire necklace is your brand narrative, and each bead is representing a little story that kind of support the overall necklace. So when you get requests from clients to kind of help validate a brand narrative, how can you actually use ethnography to kind of build and shape the story?
And it also depends, I think, if it's, you know, a legacy brand that's been around a while, or a new brand that's people don't really know about, and at what stage you're intercepting people. But a lot of times that's kind of going beyond what the actual product and service is, and almost taking the values that the company is standing by, and those other non-communicated values that go into their brand, and seeing how those fit in the eyes of their consumers' life. And you might even talk to consumers, not even about, you know, what the product or service is, but just what those values mean to you. And then start making that leap into, well, which companies, you know, come to mind when you think about someone that does that well or plays that role for you. And also one little trick or question that I love using, and maybe it's kind of cheesy, but it just works, is saying, if you're trying to compare, like, where does your brand fit, you know, in a host of other competitors, asking someone, okay, imagine you're hosting a party, and you can adapt this question to whatever's relevant. So maybe they play soccer. You could be like, imagine you're coach on a soccer team, and I'm literally making this up, but imagine you're coach on a soccer team, and you have players from X, Y, and Z brand, you know, all in the same space, and they're showing up to play on your team. What are they wearing? What kind of player are they? How collaborative are they? Are they like an I person? Are they a team person? You know, and you just start kind of personifying those characters. And you could use anything. If the person's a car enthusiast, you could be like, okay, here's X, Y, and Z brand. Which car would they be? And give me as much detail around that. How much would they be sold for? Where, you know, what kind of person's driving that car?
This is like in a perfect world, basically. You would say, you know, how would you imagine this context?
Yeah, you're like, okay, if somebody was personified from that company, and I keep an easy one, like Coke, Pepsi, you know, some of the big soft drink brands, and you say, okay, somebody from Coke is showing up to my soccer team. What are they wearing? What kind of attitude? What do they look like? What kind of player are they? Pepsi's on the team. What do they look like? So it is a bit, you know, and you've got to make sure the person can think that way, because it's
role playing in a way of storytelling.
Right. And people can answer it, you know, and you get some really surprising answers. And then it's the follow-up why. Well, why are they wearing that ridiculous outfit? Why did they choose that? What does that say about them? So it's amazing. You can get a lot of depth from not even talking about, you know, the soft drink itself.
Yeah, which I tend sometimes to use. One of my favorite sandwiches is the caprese.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah, and I tend to use that example in a presentation. Basically, whenever I need to kind of describe what a great brand narrative looks like. So, you know, the top slice is the business story.
Yeah.
The bottom slice is the customer story. And the feeling is really the must-have solution or the pain point that you know, the client's trying to solve.
Right.
So ideally, if you have a great brand narrative, it should really kind of echo the pain point that your customer is having.
Yep.
So the moment you're going to tell your story to your audience, hopefully they're going to hear their voice in that story, and they say, hey, this is my pain he's talking about. And at that moment, that brand narrative that's coming from the brand stops becoming their story, it becomes the customer story.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And there's a good example. I did a project with a what would you call them? I guess tax prep help provider. And so we're talking to people about filing their taxes. I mean, it couldn't get any more boring than that, but it wasn't boring, because you heard stories like, well, my uncle or my grandpa always files my taxes, but man, they don't actually do a good job. And also I feel guilty not going with them because they say, why would you hire someone? You don't have to pay for it. And then the story after that became, you know, the commercial of don't let your crazy aunt or crazy uncle, you know, crazy grandfather do. So it very much resonated with that voice. And also, just to add to what you're saying, the confusing thing about qualitative, I think, can be you can find the voice that's going to back up whatever you want to say. So that can get really confusing for brands because they're going to say, well, someone said this and they said this, and then this other person said this, where do we go? And that's your caprese sandwich example, because now you're aligning, well, what do we do best and what do we want to stand for? And then, okay, which part of the population is kind of speaking our language, and aligning those two instead of getting lost in the mud of like, well, now we got to do everything. It's more of figuring out, okay, but who do you want to speak with and what is their story? Because there's going to be multiple stories always.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that top slice that represent the brand, I think it's also important. It shouldn't be like kind of 100% mirror of you know, the customer, because they also bring their backstory. They have their own origin story of how they got started, their own personality. So definitely you want to portray that and bring that to the equation. But at the same time, we also know that, you know, one of the recent studies talk about specifically in the startup space, 70% of the, you know, the ventures are really failing. And when they try to figure out why, you know, there was no market need. So basically, you know, they are operating in an environment where they try to solve a nice to have problem. You know, the customer doesn't care about their problem. And
exactly.
So that's an example of, you know, why it's important to really get to the bottom of that. You have a real need, real pain point to solve.
Exactly. And that you're speaking their language too, because sometimes it could be just how you're packaging that solution.
Yeah, it's always like that. It's obviously you got to have a great product or service, that there's no doubt. But the other part, you can have the greatest Ferrari, but if you don't know how to communicate it, you know, it's going to stay in the garage, right?
Exactly.
So that part about what you just said, you know, being able to communicate with the customer language and portray their pain points is absolutely critical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one of the things that is also kind of a lot of interest for a lot of marketers is we kind of touched briefly on it before when you talked about social media listening. But typically, you know, marketers today, you know, depending on your size, but if you are, let's say, medium and up, you most likely have an agency that's working for you, and you might have one small marketing team in-house. And they most likely running your own paid and earned media, and that covers digital and social as well. But for the heavy lifting, they might outsource the work to, you know, their agency. They're going to produce their weekly, monthly, you name it, reports. So can you talk a little bit about, you know, the interplay? So as you run an ethnography projects and try to get the essence of what people are saying, what tools are you using both in the field, and what tools are you using in the online space?
Lots of different things. So in the field, you know, and obviously depends what the client has budget for, but we'd love to do video reports. I mean, we love to do the traditional report, but really do more of a documentary style video capture of the consumers. And so that can get really creative with tools, because we either are working with a professional videographer with, you know, the proper equipment, but sometimes it's just discrete GoPros or even little Sony handheld, or even on your phone. And also having that audio recorder ready always, because in the field, you could take an Uber pool ride and conduct an interview, you know, on your 15-minute transition and have that recorder ready. And off or online, the way that we're doing it now is, again, it's very much manual. So you could source, as many people as you want to boost up the internet research. I mean, it's literally time in the saddle of reading and knowing the lens of what you're looking for, what types of topics you're looking for. And
so you're coming up with a list of keywords that related to your project and topics.
So often, I guess step one would be figuring out which platforms probably have the best chance of having that topic talked about. So for example, like, let's say it's a lifestyle brand. Maybe it's fashion or fitness. So Instagram, you're going to have a ton of influencers, but also relevant posts with a ton of commentary. Whereas something like retirement packages, Instagram is probably not going to be so fruitful, but book reviews were. So step one would be kind of try to narrow down the platforms that you think are going to have robust information. And then it's going in and searching with the keywords. And that can be challenging because sometimes, it's long in a thread. I mean, you're truly just reading all of these conversations. And then what I like to do is pull all of that information into a master Excel so you don't lose the target source, and you can start isolating these comments and figuring out, okay, in this column, I've got the verbatim, what was actually said, but what is the theme? What's the underlying message that they're saying? And you kind of keep going down, and then you start seeing some of these consistencies, on the right side.
Trends and patterns. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, that then can build out into that overarching narrative and story.
But you're not using any social listening platforms in order for extracting the data. You do it manually, right?
Manually, yeah. And I know there are companies that do that are running it through and using AI and linguistics, and that's great. We just do it manually. I think there's still something to be said for things don't always fit in that package, and you can often miss it. And at first glance, it might not appear that they're talking about something valuable, but they are in how they said it or what they said. So yeah, it's very much a manual process for us.
Yeah, no, I bet but that's how you kind of uncover the gold nuggets.
Exactly.
Sometimes
I think it's a good start, like you were touching on, for the small to medium businesses that maybe they don't have, these robust teams to do it, or the budget to, and that's such a fantastic place to start, because then at least once you do have the funds to do a full-blown qualitative in-person project, you kind of already have the theories in place, or the foundation in place. So you're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall with questions. You kind of know, like, okay, you're testing for against these different theories.
Right. No, that's absolutely makes sense, because I know that a lot of people are scratching their heads about social listening, and especially when they are young and just about to start. But the reality that the data is there. I mean, it's super accessible. You just need to be able to come up with the right keywords to kind of narrow your questions, and then just, as you said, find the right platform where you think your audience tends to congregate around.
Exactly. So. And you can do, so again, for the small to medium guys, you can do things really scrappy and cheap. I mean, you could host a meetup.com event, and structure it where there's an incentive of maybe you're providing the food or the venue, and invite people in knowing that they're going to participate in a conversation about whatever your topic is. So yeah, it's always a shame to hear that things don't work because there isn't a need, because all it takes is your time and willingness to go out and ask a lot of questions to figure it out.
Sure. Yeah, so now that we touched kind of in a mini misconception about social listening, let's blow it up a little bit and say, what is the most common misconceptions about ethnography at large? Things that you come across.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest one would be the difference between qualitative and quantitative. So I'm in the qualitative space. And the quantitative space, is just as valuable. And quantitative meaning obviously big numbers, big data, 8 out of 10 people said this or feel this. Whereas qualitative is the why. So sometimes we get clients who don't necessarily know the difference, and they really want to put the qualitative into the quantitative. And it's just not how it works, because it's not statistically relevant. The qualitative serves the purpose to say, to get that's the story. I mean, that's really what it is. The qualitative is all about being able to tell the story in the color, in the words, in the environment that is important. It's not about saying 80% of the population feels this way. It's saying, okay, once you've narrowed down who you're trying to look at, how do you communicate that with them?
So let me ask you this, if that's the case, then do you tend to work typically closely with the quantitative team? So basically they go in first, come up with the numbers, and then you come after that and try to provide the why to those numbers, or?
Yeah, so both ways. So sometimes sometimes a qualitative or quantitative agency will hire us as their qualitative to put it in partnership. And then other times we're totally removed from that, and we might get exposed to prior work that's been done. And you see that a lot with persona work. And so they've already taken their customers and they've done a quantitative study to figure out different personas. Okay, our customers fit into these 4 different buckets. And under this bucket, 80% of them watch Netflix. And under this bucket, they're still watching, cable, whatever the criteria is. And that's fueled by big data on surveys. And then, so then the perfect kind of symbiotic relationship is then we're going in and it's not just, 80% are watching Netflix, but why? Why is it Netflix over regular television?
Yeah, because I would think that definitely, it's probably better for you not to see the numbers and provide an honest opinion versus try to match the story to the numbers.
Exactly. It's an interesting space. And I think in the industry, we're still trying to figure out how to work together, because numbers, it's really like left brain, right brain, right? It's taking the numbers and then the creative, and one is not better than the other. So the perfect union is when the 2 teams can really work together and use the numbers as real data, but then also listen to, it's all well and good that you've got the numbers, but it doesn't mean that it's going to change a behavior.
No, for sure.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit, like 1 or 2 examples of ethnography projects that you really liked, or if it's not yours, just examples from the industry?
Sure. Yeah. So one, and I have to admit, I love all of my projects. So I guess it's easy to answer, but
sure.
One of them was a large, actually it was another entertainment, so TV provider, service provider. And they wanted to understand small towns in America. You could assume that's because that's the population they want to start marketing and targeting with their communications, but also the type of product that they're selling. So I had designed a study that basically sent me and my backpacks across America, going to tiny little towns in Michigan, Texas, Colorado. And it was great because what I did was, really narrow the scope by population of the community, and then decide the city based on the time frame and if they had any events going on. And so in Michigan, they happen to have the Frostbite Festival, and we're talking about like population 2,000. So pretty much the entire town was at this Frostbite Festival, where there were there was outhouse races, ice plunge, ice golf, turkey bowling, where they're taking frozen turkeys and bowling on the ice. And it's great because that's a natural venue where people are open to talk. Everyone's there. I ended up meeting the mayor and police force. And so everybody's out and accessible. And also I'm a small town girl. So that was like speaking to my people. I even found myself approaching people sitting on their porch and just, walking up and asking if we could have a chat. And with that same project too, I had communicated with some of the tiny little town Facebook pages. So counties or towns will have their own Facebook page, and sending messages and say, hey, I'm coming to town. Is there anybody maybe in the community that you could set me up with to meet? And I did end up meeting the mayor that way, and then got a whole tour of the town and met some of the prominent business people in that community. So that was just really fun because it was so authentic and so raw, and there were no rules to it. And then another one, so in this one, we'll kind of show how I do use some of the online tools for the work, was on the West Coast. It was a craft beer brand that wanted to understand how their beer was positioned among all the other craft beers. So it was 15 bars in, forget, 3 or 5 days. But anyway, it was a lot of bars in a short period.
You get to go to all the fun places. That's how you pick a project, sounds like.
Totally. That is primary number one. We shouldn't ever be doing something that is not fun, in my opinion. Yeah. And so that was great because, yeah, the observation piece was literally sitting at the bar and watching what people are drinking and conversing with them because they're also sitting at the bar. But I also used some of the different social apps to help boost the recruit to get people to come and actually meet me there. So believe it or not, Tinder. And I know people are gonna, oh, that's just for the young people. No, you can set the preferences. You can make Tinder whatever you want it. And it becomes a revolving door of interviews because you're honest about what you're doing in your profile. Hey, it might be market research related. I'll buy your beer. Come talk to me for 20 minutes, or it's always more than 20 minutes, but whatever it is. And I just get to sit there and wait for people to come to me. So same thing, couch surfing. Couch surfing, you don't only use couch surfing to stay the night with people. There's discussion boards, community boards where you can post, hey guys, you give me advice on the best craft beer in, whatever city. And then you get all these people giving you advice and telling you places to check out. And then it's like, okay, cool guys, I'm going to be here at this time between these times. If you come on over, I'll buy you a beer. And again, it's like, you're getting these apps to work for you in a very natural and organic way.
Yeah, because you're kind of leveraging the local intelligence to kind of get advice. And once you get the advice, you just open the door for kind of the face-to-face interaction.
Exactly. Yep, exactly.
That's awesome. So when you have a project completed, we understand now how you work, what is the end-to-end process looks like, the business objectives, how's the outcome looks like, how your report looks like, how do you measure success? Yeah,
and that's a tricky one because, well, first of all, just tangibly, the report is kind of twofold. So we do, well, I think they're spectacular reports because it's less about all the words and more about even having the report tell the story with really simple, edgy titles, and then just enough with the verbatims and some photos and things like that. But the video also then really, really does justice. And when clients are open to it, which we always appreciate and like, is when they want to be involved in the process. So even like going back to the cross-country small town research, part of the deliverable was less about what I put on paper after the fact, and it was more about me taking some of the people from, their boardroom, let's just say, out into the field and joining me. So I'm taking them on this experience where they get to live and breathe what the consumers are saying in a comfortable and safe way, because I've really done the work to align the people that we're meeting and where we're going and those soft introductions. So that's very much part of it too. And then other times, again, it depends what the client wants, but it could be a workshop. So you deliver the results, but then you might spend a day in the boardroom just workshopping different ideas where we really don't try to tell a business what they should do. We're very much the objective, here's the data, here's what we heard, unbiased, but it's your job to figure out how that fits with your business strategy and where you want to go with it. But the nice thing about the workshop is just when you hear them kind of going off in one direction, you're like, okay, no, but this is really what we heard. And that can be important because it's really hard for brands to let go of their babies and let go of their ideas that they have spent a lot of time working on. And the beauty of being an outside party is I don't really care. I'm going to report on the objective findings, and I don't have any stake in the company to lose position. And I can say the things that need to be said.
You're representing the customer voice in essence, basically.
Exactly. What was the last part of your question? I went on my tangent.
In terms of, how do you measure success? Do you have like specific categories that you deliver every time?
So, and that was tricky because it's not numbers based, because it's qualitative. So like I was saying earlier, you can find the voice that will back up whatever you want to hear. So you'll always find someone that believes in what you believe. And so I guess, I don't know, success is on different levels. Like for me, I feel very successful when we get deep, rich insights. And when we get that story that the client had no idea about, or we see the client's
blind spots.
Totally.
Yep.
Yeah. Or you thought they thought about it this way, but they really don't. So the quality of insights to me is success, again, because I don't have a hand in what they do with that after. And that's for them to fight out in the boardroom. But then it is always an extra kudos when you see the foundation of your work turn into a commercial or turn into a new product.
New feature. Yep.
Yeah. And you know, oh, they made those changes because of this research. And so, I mean, that's the ideal signal of success, along with getting the phone call back for a second project.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
That's cool. So you've been in the space now for a couple of years and most likely exposed to where it's headed, but any inklings to, you know, how the future looks like for ethnographic research and what type of tools people like yourself would use?
Yeah, I do. And I have lots of entrepreneurial ideas that I'm selfishly being very hidden about, but in general, I think in the VR space is really interesting, which it's already happening. So I know, I think it's still early stage, but like you can put on the VR headset and your consumer can like shop the grocery store aisle, you know, virtually, which is all well and good, but I want to use it for the storytelling. I think it would be really interesting to be delivering reports in a VR experience rather than just flat video. So I definitely think, there's more space to go there. I'm hoping that that the human side of it is never, you know, outdated. I think partly job security, but also I believe in the fact that technology can only do so much, and you need that human to human
interaction.
But I do think just overall, at least in my experience in the industry, there's so much room to do things in really unique, innovative, non-traditional ways. So like, for example, if you're doing a liquor project, rent out a bar and host your focus group at the bar and get someone to be the bartender and, you know, create that real space. So I feel like those methodologies aren't happening enough.
Yeah, I think to your point, I think what you're saying in essence is that every time you want to kind of get yourself embedded into your target customer environment, you want to play a role in whatever they're already doing. So how can you dramatize, you know, this environment from the get-go? So instead of just waiting in line with somebody, how about if you create, you know, the environment, the destination environment, like a bar that he's going to end up with.
Exactly.
But so basically it's like kind of bringing the volume a little bit on a larger scale than just using the existing settings.
Exactly. And another, I think, area that should continue evolving is with the recruiting side of it. So I do a lot of stuff in like in-person recruiting, literally intercepting someone on the street and asking them to talk to me. But there's still going to be the time and place to pay the recruiting company to get the 15 people that meet, you know, the screener criteria and X, Y, and Z background elements. But I think that there's a lot that could be done with utilizing, you know, influencers on social media, influencers who have active audience. I mean, especially on Instagram. So 100,000 people watching their profiles. And let's say it is a lifestyle, I don't know, let's pretend it's a food brand. If you can connect with an influencer that's willing to post that opportunity on your behalf, then you have a whole new database of potential respondents that aren't in the current company's databases. So that's something too that happens, is the same people are getting pooled to do interviews because they're these existing databases. So I think new ways to get people into research to be participants is ripe for doing it differently than how it's been done.
One thing is, I know that I forgot how it's called. I think it's Amazon Talk.
Okay.
Where people can pose a question and, you know, they get a lot of feedbacks. Typically, developers are using it for starting a new prototype.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I've heard that's been super successful, and it's kind of
Smart.
a open source, open community.
Smart.
Yeah, yeah. This is another area that's also kind of started to using anything with the mobile to basically mobile is really like we are connected to it 24/7.
Yeah, totally.
But anything you do with mobile?
We do, and there's a ton of different third-party platforms that make it really easy for you. So I'll give you a couple examples. Yeah, they've made it really easy where the respondent can, download the app and basically do lots of things. They could like daily check-ins and react to questions in real time. So maybe it's a week-long study and the person participating is on their app and they have to go shopping and they have to take photos of what they looked at and they have to upload little video, how am I feeling today? Or you could push them real-time questions on, that they have to answer through the app. So yeah, there's a ton of platforms that act as a service to the researcher to be able to interact with people that way. And that's, again, comes down to just the methodology. That would be like, okay, we're using this as the methodology to collect insights. And I guess another way that I've used it, it's a bit of a tangent though, because it goes back to the social platforms, but Snapchat, for example, if I don't want to, pay for that third-party platform, people already understand Snapchat and it's all built in. You can download that video. You can put an awesome geo filter on it. So then in your cumulative report of a bunch of videos, it has the filter of where they are and you see a nice, like prove that you've spoken to people from X, Y, and Z location. And it's a platform that they already understand how to use to take that video of themselves talking about whatever topic and download an email. So there's definitely ways to just use the basics.
Absolutely. Well. And speaking about videos, obviously when you report your results, you mentioned you use videos, and I assume this is kind of the raw video footage of people saying, whatever they thought about questions that you raised. Did you see examples where ethnographic research turned into like a whole brand, like a documentary, like a whole narrative documentary, which is edited as a film and not just as a raw footage?
I don't know. I would love to do that with all of my projects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically it's like the making of, or behind the scene of, and
totally. Yeah, and I think it would be cool. I mean, that it's always, tough with the NDAs and the research has to stay
of course,
hyper confidential with whoever's hiring you. But I do a lot of passion projects. So I think, that could be really cool. And I suppose, it's journalism, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Cool. All right. So I want to thank you so much for a fantastic time today. I learned a ton from, this fascinating work that you do. And I hope to continue staying in touch and even collaborate at some point. And for our audience that have been watching or listening, if they want to ask you some questions, how can they contact you?
They can stalk me on whatever social media platform they want. Should I share my email and just say it out loud?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so it would be Tory, Tory .Gentes, which is GENTES, at the palmerstongroup.com. But you can also find me on LinkedIn, Tory Gentes, Tory with a Y, not an I.
Yep.
Find me on Facebook under the same name. Instagram, same name.
Awesome. Good stuff. All right.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Thank you. All right. And for all of you watching and listening, we'll catch you up in the next episode of Visual Storytelling Today. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.